Okay, here we are. This is the Portland Film Festival alumni panel, where you're joined by 4 filmmakers, including myself here, that have all been alumni of this festival and are back with, as part of this alumni group. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things, but certainly telling you a little bit about our respective films that were in the festival and our experience. But I think the main focus of this conversation is what happens, well, during a festival run and then after a festival run. I know there's a lot of first-time filmmakers in this year's festival, but whether this is your first go or your 10th go, we all have questions, and it's always great to hear from other people's experiences. So why don't we kick things off and introduce ourselves? Natalie, do you want to give a little intro of who you are in your film that you're an alumni with?
Yeah. So my film is called I Am Talent, and it's the story of a skateboarder who travels from the streets of homelessness, from the streets of Durban, South Africa, all the way to LA. And it's a deep dive into the culture and the community of skateboarding. And it's really this beautiful coming of age story. And we actually came to the festival, I think, in 2016. We came to the festival. I think I might have that wrong. Might be 2015. So it's a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, we came to the festival with our distributor. Mm-hmm. We had actually made a deal with our distributor. We had played a festival beforehand, and this was the festival. We were sort of continuing on the festival circuit to continue to increase kind of awareness of the film. Mm-hmm. So that's my and had a great experience. Very sort of it was a great sort of, it's a wonderful festival in terms of being able to sort of connect with other filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And see great films. It's very sort of community orientated. So compared to some of the other festivals, that was one of the highlights of the Portland Film Festival for me, was sort of connecting with other folks who were in the sort of thick of things, getting their films out to the world. So
yeah, very well. That'll 2 points story in the back of our heads here. The distribution, coming to a festival with distribution, will be interesting to talk about in a moment. Yeah. And also just what makes a festival kind of worthwhile, I think, are 2 things that I'm stowing in the back of my mind here as we move on to Catherine. If you want to give us a little intro here on who you are and your alumni film.
Yes, I do. But I also want to know, Natalie, it was your film, or is your film a short or a feature?
It's a feature documentary. Yeah, it's
okay.
A feature documentary.
Okay. So yeah, my film, I'm sorry to do this. I have to always do this, but you have to push the discs. If you do make a feature film, this is one of the few ways you're actually going to be able to make some money back. I know it seems old school, but people still buy records. Some people still like to touch books like me. I like to write in a journal. So there will be people for 2,000 views when you stream your film. You will make the same as one disc sale. So that's something to think about. We get 0.3 cents per hour viewed. I had my feature film Parallel Chords at the Portland Film Festival in 2018, and I am so thankful that I went. It was a really unique experience because I think that when we were talking a little bit before we started this about distribution, I did a short version of it first. And so with the short version, I did take it to a lot of festivals, but still somewhat selective. You don't necessarily want to have every single laurel on your promotions. But it's good to get it to a lot of places. If you have in mind, maybe you want to do a short that you're hoping becomes a feature, doing that short kind of thing and a lot of festivals will kind of help you find more people that if they like your short, they'll kind of follow you along. I know a lot of people have, some people are really great with social media and they have huge followings and stuff like that. People say that I'm okay at it, but that's not really me. I'm an in-person person, and maybe 200 people kind of keep track of what I do. So you got to kind of turn those 200 into 4 into 6 into 1,000 and so forth. So my feature was what was at Portland, and I had that kind of guidance and advice that when I released the feature, to actually not show it in that many places because we did not have distribution yet. But kind of early on, we first started showing it in places like Woods Hole and some really like Portland, you know, really cool smaller festivals, not a Sundance thing. And it, you know, just try not to show it too many times if you really want distribution. But we had interest early on, but you also want to wait a little bit too. So Portland was actually the last place that I went before making that final, you know, paperwork decision on who we were going to go with and stuff. And I almost didn't go. I wanted to go, but it was, you know, it's a financial thing and challenging, but festivals like Portland, that a lot of them will make it really nice for you and give you, you know, hosts. And I think that's another thing that you really get out of this is not just, you know, what do I do with my film next, but you're building these relationships with really cool people that you'll probably keep talking with for years to come. And I know my hosts, they were two people like, I believe in their 80s that had way more energy than anybody I'd ever met. And they were going to shows all day long. They were going to other things before the festival opened up in the morning, and then they'd be going to the parties at night. I was just like, oh my gosh. So I keep in touch with them. And yeah, I haven't even said what my film is about, but it's a father-daughter relationship. If you've seen Whiplash, it's like a father-daughter twist, deals with consent and control, and is very kind of a lot of different timelines and loosely autobiographical, and just a real sort of intense relationship that the father is losing the feeling in his hands. He's a classical concert pianist. He's leaning on the daughter to keep music alive. She feels responsible to keep him in a positive place, but at the same time wants to kind of break free from him. So that sort of thing, wrestling with what does she do? Does she help him or does she help herself, is kind of what the whole film is about. So yeah, I'll zip it now and you guys can.
Oh, great. That's a great intro. And Maureen, why don't you introduce yourself there?
Hi, nice to meet all of you and also the audience. Hi. I brought my feature documentary to Portland. I was invited to come in 2016. So I don't know if I didn't meet you, Natalie, but if you were there in 2016, I'm sorry I didn't, but I'm glad to meet you now. So hi. The film is called My Millennial Life. And I was very excited to come to Portland because it was my first not my first American festival, but with this film, the first time I brought the film into the States. I'm from Canada. I'm from Toronto. I had played at Rain Dance, I believe. It's a while ago, right? So I brought it abroad, but I hadn't brought it to the States. So for me, it was totally exciting. I'd been to Austin, to the Austin Film Festival, but I'd never been to the Portland Film Festival. And that was with a different film for the Austin, but it was so amazing to come to Portland because I'd heard a lot about Portland, but I'd never been there, and it was so accessible, and everybody was accessible, and the whole festival staff were just like right there for me and for the other filmmakers too. So I loved it. I got some great press from it, which was amazing. Yeah, so what can I say? I can't remember. I think I already had distribution because I remember my distributor, who's out of London, England, went to the Rain Dance Film Festival because I couldn't make it. So they went and kind of did the dance and song and dance around the film. So I already had distribution. I'll talk about that in a moment. But anyway, the film is called My Millennial Life. I did it in 2016. It has 5 subjects. It's an observational film. I shot it over a year. A little more actually, and it was looking at young people, 20-somethings who had just finished school or dropped out of school. I need to be inclusive because everybody didn't do exactly this, follow the same path, and they were trying to kind of make their own mark in the world. And it was a time where there was over 50% of unemployment and underemployment combined. The film still remains, I would have to say, fairly relevant because, especially after COVID, because although things started to upswing a little bit after 2016, the gig economy kicked in, number one, which meant that underemployment is still a horrible, I mean, it's a very difficult situation, let's put it that way. And also with COVID, of course, there was mass unemployment again. So it's a film that young people can watch. It in fact looks at sort of different what should I say, milestones, but they're milestones in the contemporary sense. That's how I modeled it, because the old milestones of the 50s, 60s, and 70s are very different milestones than we're today. I mean, the old milestones were, you know, you find a full-time job that you're at forever, or at least you have a career, you're career-based, you get married, you have a family, you buy a house. So those were all those things. And so we kind of we looked at what is it today and what makes it different today. That's not what the film isn't, what makes it different, but that's how we kind of conceived it. I was actually the producer, co-writer, and director. So, I mean, actually I did a lot of it, but I worked with lots of people, and I worked with a lot of youth on it also, which was great. And also my kids were that age, or actually my son was. My daughter was just getting there. So, and he actually ended up doing, we brought in a lot of his music because he's a musician. So that was also really wonderful for me to be able to work with family on it. But there's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of hopelessness, but there's also a lot of drive. And that's what I found with the group, is that it's a really driven group of young people who, yeah, we get to see what they do and how they react. So anyway, love to talk more. I'll talk about distribution maybe when you bring that up, Doug. I hope we hear about your film too.
Yeah, I'll share real quick, and then maybe we'll jump right into distribution, since that came up in everyone's talk. So my name is Doug Roland. I think I'm the newest alumni of the bunch here. I was in the festival last year with a short called Feeling Through. So had a little bit of a different experience at the festival. It was all virtual last year, but still, you know, really interesting time to be sharing a film. I think there was a lot of, you know, disappointment among a lot of filmmakers during that time. I know I was initially disappointed because we were about to start our festival run. Like, I think it was like 5 days before the lockdown was going to be our first festival, and things obviously changed, but it ended up actually being a really interesting time to share a film because everyone was kind of trying to figure it out at the same time. So it's always interesting to see how people kind of have to, you know, accommodate wildly new situations. And at the other time, in the other way, it was also an opportunity to actually share the film with a lot more people right off the bat, because there weren't the same kind of restrictions of geography or seats in a theater. So it was really, for instance, like one of the things that, you know, was interesting about Portland last year was this like Comcast Xfinity partnership and sharing some of our conversations and what have you to a large subscriber base there, and kind of exploring new things there. So that was really interesting. And of course, filmmakers now in 2021 are still experiencing a lot of the same things as last year in 2020. And, you know, now very much in this hybrid world of, you know, some festivals being completely virtual, some being completely in person, and a lot of them being a little bit of both. So that's been an interesting transition. But Feeling Through, real quick, was inspired by a real life encounter I had 10 years ago with the first person who's deafblind I'd ever met. But it's a fictionalized, you know, kind of take on that of a teen in need who has an encounter with a deafblind man on a New York City street corner late one night. And it's about a small amount of time that they share with each other, and the lasting impact they leave on each other's lives. It was an interesting film to make. It was it's the first film to star a deafblind actor. That was something that was very important, the authentic casting of it. I partnered with the Helen Keller National Center to make the film. Before we ever did any festivals, we created fully accessible screening events so that anyone who is deafblind, blind, or low vision could have a fully accessible experience alongside sighted and hearing audience members as well, which was something that we were very fortunately able to do just before the pandemic, to kick off in person, and then did a lot virtually. So it was a really unique film for me, and also one in which not too long after Portland, we did an Academy Awards run and got nominated for an Oscar and went through that whole experience, and now we're back in festivals again and also thinking about the future. So it's been, I think we have an interesting cross sampling of you know, I've had a feature that I've produced before and have some experience with distribution, but I think I'll wear the hat of shorts and shorts distribution to fill that category, while we have some great panelists who can talk about the feature end of it. So, you know, again, I think distribution is something that people always want to hear stories about, and it sounds like all four of us have something to share about that. So Natalie, kicking it back to you, you talked about coming to Portland with the distributor. Maybe you want to talk a little bit more of how you decided to go with that distributor, how that went down, and then what it's like to maybe go to still some festivals with a distributor and kind of where you went from there.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. So one of the reasons I was able to come to Portland with the distributor is because I'd had a successful film festival screening. And I think we won the audience award at the LA Film Festival. It was 2015 that we were there. That was when we kicked it off. And what happened was, so this is why I think your festival screening is important, your first one especially. If you can get into a festival where you can really sort of partner with the festival organizers and have them and create excitement around your film. It's an opportunity to generate press. It's an opportunity to get people in the theater. And so we won the audience award, and that, I don't think that was sort of by accident either. Like when we had our first screening, you know, really of that first, you know,
Getting a little choppy here. Are other people having that issue too? Is it frozen? Okay, just checking there. Natalie.
I'm back.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
I saw that connection's unstable. I was just saying, you know, I really worked hard on I got rejected from a lot of festivals, first of all. So I want to go back to the backstory of this, because I think this is an important part for people who are sort of trying to get your film up and out there. I got rejected from a lot of festivals. And I actually reworked the film. I actually got rejected from the LA Film Festival and then reworked the film and got accepted. And they, you know, it was, you know, definitely through conversations with, I had an executive producer who knew somebody there who said, please give the film another watch, give them another opportunity. And they watched it, they were excited about it. And they said, if we give you the theater, you know, you've got to make this a big event. And I did. I really took that to heart. I got a publicist. I worked harder than I did on the whole film to get the bums in the seats. And I believe we won the audience award because people were so excited. You know, the film was good, but I filled that theater, and we had kids queuing up around the block to get into that screening. And that sort of physical response to the film was able, you know, the person who bought the film and didn't buy I did the distribution deal with, was in the theater that night. I could sort of show the interest, the passion, the sort of the audience's response to the film. The festival was an opportunity for me to create enough of a hype and excitement around the film to sort of go on. So I continued to go to festivals because it was another way for me to get bums in the seats, get my talent out in front of the film as well, which was really important. It wasn't as much about me, but it was, you know, definitely it was about this character, this young man, and then, you know, the culture of skateboarding. So it was about getting him out in front of the audience as well to talk to people, because he was my greatest asset. And I had done I don't think I'd even penned the final, you know, signed the agreement with the distributor, but the distributor wanted me to continue to do, you know, attend these festivals, connect with other filmmakers, connect with audiences, people who are interested, and go to the cities and do the sort of grassroots campaigning for the film. And we only released the film like in 2016, which is what confuses me a little bit about that sort of festival circuit. But we were on the festival circuit for like a year, doing different festivals and screenings around the world wherever we could. And, you know, that was one distribution partner that, you know, I connected with. It was for the US. And I have, you know, over the years connected with partners in Japan, for example, who are doing my physical. The only place we have a physical release is in Japan. And actually we did that, you know, it was a pretty lucrative, comparatively speaking, you know, in indie film, it was like probably the best deal that we saw the most money out of was our Japan physical release. And then, you know, that's 10 years on, not 10, 8, 6, 7 years on. I'm expanding the timeline. You know, we are still selling like a TV sale here and there. You know, it sort of continues. So anyway, that was my festival experience. I really believe wholeheartedly in, you know, you know, the physical, which I know you didn't get an opportunity with last year, Doug, but, you know, it's not just, it's the campaigning that goes around sort of getting people to watch your film, whether it's online or physically in the audience. I think it's like, you know, it's as much a part of making the film. It's as important to an independent filmmaker as making the film.
So many great nuggets in there. So you know, filmmakers and experienced filmmakers alike should be taking notes on that, because I think some of the things that stand out the most from what you said is, first and foremost, how much work and effort you need to put into the exhibition distribution side of things. A lot of times there's a lot of filmmakers that kind of, look, if you're a part of a big machine that's taking care of all that, it's maybe a different scenario. Not that you shouldn't still be investing your time and energy in it, but as independent filmmakers, that's a huge part of the job that a lot of people kind of fall short on. You know, put so much time, love, and energy into creating the film, and then kind of like, you know, just kind of like peter out when it comes time to really put in that energy and into exhibition distribution, because there's not an inevitability to it, in the sense that, perfect example you just shared, you know, you'd gotten rejected by a really great festival that you went on to win the audience award at. That's not by accident, in the sense that like the insight and follow through to, you know, gain what information you could and you know, give it another crack is emblematic of what I feel like a lot of successful filmmakers do. I know with Feeling Through, you know, we got rejected by a ton of stuff before we started winning a ton of stuff, and then got nominated for an Oscar. So it's like, there were festivals that we got rejected from first time around that came back and eagerly asked us to be a part of it the next year. So it's like, it's just an example of the fact that to not be resigned to this seeming fate that's handed to you, or just to kind of let the chips fall where they may. There's an element of that in life, of course, but there's a lot of energy and effort that needs to go into making things happen. So, you know, Catherine, do you want to share a little bit about your distribution experience?
Yes, and I don't know if this is going to be a theme when we talk, that I always come back to Natalie with a question or say something, but you probably can't read my handwriting here, but I'm the same as Doug, just saying, this says publicist, you know, with a nice circle around it, like over and over and over. That's just the most important thing. And unfortunately, when you started talking about, for me, I was feeling really great, and I started hearing that, I started feeling like just exhausted, nervous, stressed out. Like when you are someone who's actually written something fairly emotional and then put all the work into like raising the money for it and sculpting it just so. And with me, it's just been a really long process, because I actually wrote the feature script first. Just so you guys know, I'm in St. Louis. I'm a longtime New Yorker who moved to St. Louis for love. So when I was in New York, I had the script optioned. The first time was like 2 years, and then I extended that, and then I took the rights back, and then I optioned it to other people. And, you know, time and life just goes on. And then, you know, I started kind of all over out here in the Midwest, and, you know, cultivated this small short. And so like, it's just been with me for so long. And as we were getting closer to the release of the feature, which I wanted to timing wise, with Doug, you being not getting that theatrical thing, we actually released theatrically in Los Angeles the second half of 2019. And we're still, you know, for people who don't know yet, after you do that, it's not like, you know, bam, you're going. You're still providing more technical things to your distributor after the release. Was like, now we're getting the Blu-ray and DVD stuff, and now we're moving on to this. So we had it kind of scheduled that March of 2020 we were gonna, for Women's Month, do this big, you know, push of in-person and disc sales and all that kind of stuff, and then all of that changed. So I know a lot of filmmakers did really well with that pivot of doing sort of Zoom screenings and stuff like that. But with my film, one of the things about it is I had a chance to see how people were reacting, anywhere from 10 people in the audience to 250 people in the audience, and how my whole goal is like to heal a little bit with this film. And so it's got a lot of secrets and things that are layered in there. And by me being at screenings, a lot of times people felt really more comfortable being able to come out and talk about things that maybe they'd never talked about before. You know, there is a breach of consent in the film, I should say. And, you know, so it's just really emotional. So going back to the publicist thing, as we were getting, you know, closer and closer to launch, I'm still wearing a lot of the hats. You know, I had somebody who locally was a producer, but she had never produced a film before. And so I kept telling people it was in my budget. We need to have the publicity, but it kind of feels like sometimes if you've worked on a project for a long time that people are like, oh, but you did that already. You're done. Like once you finish it, you're done. But it's like, oh my gosh, no, it's this whole other job. And so I think one of the hardest things, or one of the things I tell people is like stamina. Think about stamina. You're going to have stamina and decide how much you want to give to that part, because last year for me it was like, okay, I had to decide, do I keep working on the salesman part of this, or do I let all this other, I'm not a person who can't figure out a story. I've got stories going in me all the time. So I had to kind of like decide, do I shift and go back to who I really am, which is the creative part, or do I keep trying to find, you know, somebody to help push the publicity and do that properly? And so I still feel like I lag on that, because we do have a distributor. They place it in a lot of places, but it sounds like maybe Natalie and other people might have more of a push from their distributor. Ours are really good at just like placing it, but that doesn't mean marketing and publicity. It just means placing it places. So I feel like there's a hole there that I still need to kind of fill. And if you're a first-time filmmaker, you be aware there's a big pothole there. And then, you know, the creative, though, is just like, okay, so now I've gotten a couple of new things that are kind of neat, and I'm working on a series. And so I'm hoping that from what I do with that if I just keep staying true to the creative part, that hopefully as more and more people get on board with the new thing, that maybe they'll go, oh yeah, I heard about the other thing, but I never got around to seeing it. So I'm hoping that just kind of keeps going through. Anyway, I don't know if that helped at all.
Yeah, no, that last part, that's definitely a real phenomenon, that like, you know, new stuff can also direct eyeballs to your former stuff as well. Yeah. And that's why it's like, you know, Natalie, you were saying this too about a film that, you know, you released several years ago now, that's still, you know, getting distributed and being in places. And films can have very long lives, especially if there's a certain niche or angle that keeps them relevant in certain spaces or places. And that, you know, that is a great example of how to keep older work or former work like relevant and still in places as well.
You know what's interesting, Doug, just something to follow up on that point is I've got a great distributor down in Australia. Madman Films, a really, really great distributor for independent films. And I didn't even know, I hadn't even realized that they were part of like a group that had bought the film in that region. And I released another film in 2020. Again, you know, we never got the theatrical release. It's a music film about Max Richter, the composer Max Richter. And they picked that up. And as soon as they picked it up, they emailed me. They were like, this is great. We've got another title in your, in your repertoire. I was like, oh, I have a repertoire now. This is wonderful. And they were super excited and actually more supportive because they and I saw that there was sort of more views of my film from 4 or 5 years ago as a result of this new film that came out, because they marketed and promoted, and then of course they're like, more from this director. So 100% what you're saying there is just like, it's true. You're building, it's the sum of everything. It's not one, you're not a one-hit wonder. Everything you do now is building towards the sort of, ideally, this longevity and longer relationships with distributors that become supportive. And there are distributors out there who will support that and who get excited and maybe even pick up something that didn't get distribution initially, will pick it up to have something like in the repertoire, more from this director.
Well, you're well on your way to have the Natalie Johns box set, with your distributor. You're like halfway there. So
if only that was really true. But yeah.
What about you, Maureen? You'd mentioned a little bit about. Oh, sorry, Catherine, were you hopping in with something?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to hit two other things just because it's stuff that helped me, and so I feel like it could be really helpful, which was that. So the one, if there's any positive of last year, is that for someone like me who is in the Midwest and not in New York or LA, I am a part of a lot of organizations that are in those places. And so because of what was going on last year, there were things available to me that I would normally have had to be in person. And one of those was a couple of workshops with John Ridley, the writer of 12 Years a Slave. And one of the things that yeah, exactly, right?
he's like my hero.
He's amazing.
And
so one of the things that was going on for me is that I still had some other like features in my mind about artists that I was like, working on. I'm like, how in the world am I going to go up this hill again of this, how long it took to do the previous thing. And yet this is what I want to do. And he just told us that if anyone has any IP whatsoever, if you have any intellectual property that's already done, it's almost like typecasting. You need to look at that and then redo that just a little bit, whether it's a series or whether it's a play or whether the themes in there are something you want to explore in a different setting or whatever, in such a way that when people start to look at the new thing, they can reference the previous thing until you start to make a living. If you're making a living, you don't worry about it. You can do whatever you want. You can go left and right as much as you want, but something that can give people a flavor of what you're trying to do. So I thought that was like, I was like, ding, okay, I can do this local thing and kind of build it like an accordion where it's as small as I have money for or as big. And that's something I can do right away. And the other thing I have is more of a question for the group and for us as a whole is the distribution of shorts is totally, that went past me, because when I was doing this short, I was headed towards the feature, and I'd love to know if that's something, without like spending a ton of time, that is a new or more viable option. So anyway. Yeah, those are the two things.
I definitely have a lot to share on the shorts end, but Maureen, do you want to jump in about your
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I actually have a lot of films that I've done, so definitely that's absolutely true. Things build on other things. I have old films that are coming out because there are new streaming platforms, and so now, like, yeah, it's great. And if you also have an advocate behind it, if it has a social kind of interest behind it, then it's even better, because then there's groups that are actually out there promoting it for you, not for you, but for the reason that, for their own reasons, which is what you want. You need advocates and people with agency to be promoting it. It can't just be your distributor, but because the distributors have like 20 million films, right? So they can only do so many. But I wanted to say that the one thing about My Millennial Life is it has been, for me, and continues to be, a film that keeps giving, which not all my films do that. Like, some do it more than others. And I actually won what would be the Canadian Screen Award for documentary for that film in 2017, actually, because it was a year later, which is the top award that you can win, one of the top awards you can win in documentary. And I had done it as a cross-platform. So I also had an iDoc. So I have the analog film that played at Portland, but I also have an interactive doc that I also did where I used some of the same people and I also included new people and whatever. And that was really great in terms of being able to kind of, they both supported one another. It drew a lot of attention. The iDoc went to Doc Lab at Amsterdam, IDFA Amsterdam. It was like brought in as one of the best of cross platforms for 2016. So it really, that sort of elevated it in a sort of a European way also, which helped with sales. So, you know, you're always looking for different tie-ins and different things that will keep giving. And if you do have a film that does that, I mean, I just got some money for them selling to television. What I find though, and my distributor is TVF International out of London, England. And then I have with my most recent film, I have Good Docs for the Educational in the States, which is like a fantastic distributor, and they do very much social action kinds of films. The most recent is called 17 and Life Doesn't Wait, which is about 3 teen girls in their final year of high school, so making that sort of transformative leap. But I would say that publicist is really important. Absolutely, I would agree with you, Catherine and Natalie, and I don't know whether you mentioned that, Doug, but I think one couldn't say enough for publicists. And especially finding the publicist that is the right one for your film. There's all sorts of different publicists, so you need the right one. And
can I ask you a question about publicists?
Yeah.
Like how you found, because I was thinking, how did you find your publicist? Because thankfully I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. It's very hard, like if you're starting out. How did you find yours?
Yeah, that's exactly how I found mine in Toronto. I worked out of Toronto, and then when I had another film that was being released in the States, she connected me with the States.
Mm-hmm.
With a publicist in the States. So you basically mine their network because they want to do that because they may be able to do part of it, which means they may also earn something from it. So I think that's really good. I will mention though that I'm not as good as some of you are with the after effects of doing the festival circuit. First of all, I never have any money left when I'm done. So I have a bid for a publicist and you know, festivals get really expensive. So unless it's invited or I've selected it very much. I mean, Portland, I was really interested in being part of because Portlandia had been on the television and I knew that there was there might be some interest in the subject area that I had, and I felt it was made. I didn't know it was a good bet, but I hoped it was because I felt it would kind of again elevate the film and the subject matter, and it was taken, and I was thrilled. And as I told you, I loved going there. But I tend to because I do more teach also, but because I really consistently make films. I have to move on to my next one. I really do. I find I cannot stay with a film too long. I mean, I'm there and I'm around, but I feel bad sometimes that I leave it, but one, I can't afford to stay with it. And two, I'm on to my next project. And I think it's a matter of finding a happy medium. And I feel sometimes I don't do justice to the projects that I've finished, but I have to let them find their own world too. I can't just keep flogging them, and then I need to move on to something else. And I also, you know, it's also a fee business, no matter what. You know, you draw on your budget line items, and as a producer director, I need that to live, to keep generating new ideas. And I find the busier I am, and I say this to my students too, so for all you young filmmakers out there, keep working. Don't isolate yourself. Like, keep working in the industry, or even if you can't find a job in the industry, keep working and earning some money and opening your eyes, because you never know where you'll end up and where your work will end up. So, and where your ideas come from. So that's kind of my modus operandi. Again, I wish I had more money and I wish I could stay on the project and get, you know, but, you know, so I really select my festivals carefully, and then I move on.
Yeah, really, really great words of advice there. And I think, just heard, we've talked about both sides of it, of like needing to move on to the next thing, and also how you do justice to the thing that you've created to put out in the world. And I think that's going to be different for everyone in each situation. One thing that I will, from like not just my own experience, but talking to a lot of other filmmakers at different stages, I think one piece of advice that I would give pretty universally would be, if you are earlier in your career, and maybe that could mean in number of films you've made, or like kind of the ability to like maybe early on in getting your film out to like a wider audience, or getting it to a lot of festivals, getting recognition from it. And that first thing that really catches for you, I think it's really important to see that through as well and as deeply as possible, because you can kind of learn all of the lessons that you need to learn from one project that you really invest into each category of it, so that you don't necessarily have to do that again. As you start to get busier as a filmmaker, as you're working on more projects, maybe you don't need to invest that same amount of time. And, whether it's, again, having a publicist and a distributor who's taking care of more of that the next time, whatever that is, it's kind of very relative to where you are in your career and what you have going on. But I would strongly suggest that first thing that you have that really takes hold, it's really great to invest a lot of time and energy in each step of it, because you can get a master class in all of the things from one project. And I think conversely, the like mistake that I see some filmmakers make is like too early on feeling this thing of like, just need to make stuff, but don't actually take the time to invest in any one of those things to kind of get what you might want to get out of it that would kind of maybe take you to the next step in your career. So it's that balancing act for sure. And of course, Maureen is someone like you who's, well into your career and done a number of things. You're better off not spending too much time on something, because if you have the opportunity to move on to other things and create new things, that's you should be doing that. So I think it's a little relevant. Now I'm going to take a quick moment here to talk about the shorts end of things. Having had experience with the feature and several shorts as far as the whole shebang of film festivals and distribution, very different arenas here. So, there's some universal things, but very different rules for a short. I'll talk really quickly about two different modes of distribution of experiences that I've had. One was one that I kind of like backed into, and the other was one that I did a little bit more consciously down the line. But I had a film called Jada from, I think that I was mainly 2016, 2017, a short that I was on the festival circuit with. It did well on the, played in a bunch of good festivals. It did a good job, but I was pretty green at that time about like a lot of things, including distribution. And I had someone who'd seen the film who I knew, who was like, oh, there's this YouTube channel that's curating shorts that's starting to get a large following. And, maybe you should throw it up there. It's like a non-exclusive deal. And just, why don't you see if it gets a lot of eyeballs? I checked it out at the time. I think they had, like something like 250,000 subscribers. And I saw like a decent amount of the films had like gotten 1 million views. And at worst case scenario, it seemed like a lot of them got like 10,000, 20,000 at the time. I'm like, hey, if 1,000 people saw this online, that would be kind of cool. And it was a situation where it went up online, and within a day it started going viral. In a weekend, it had 6 million views, and it now has 24 million views on YouTube. And it's the most watched film on their platform. And it felt very fluky to me at the time, because I really thought like something was wrong with the YouTube algorithm when it started. Like I would like, there was like a day where I would like refresh an hour later and it had 300,000 more views. And I'm like, okay, my phone is broken, because this is not possible. Like it has no name people in it. It's like a 16-minute kind of like relatively slow moving character study of a 7-year-old girl. There's no one gets kicked in the nuts. There's no explosions. Like, why is this going viral kind of situation? Which again is another thing of like, know what you have, but don't make assumptions about the limitations of it sometimes too. Mm-hmm. There's that balance too. And that ended up being something where I learned about, how for a short particularly, where traditionally speaking, you'll always hear people say, oh, you're not going to make any money on shorts. You're not going to make any money on shorts, which is true very much, like most of the time that's true, but that's certainly not always true. So one example was a case where a little bit into the success of that film, Jada was also like the pilot program for them to start to monetize their films, because they hadn't done that on this platform yet. Now, fast forward, Omeletto is the channel. They have like 3.3 million subscribers. They monetize films that hit a certain threshold there, and they're certainly doing an amazing job curating great films. And Jada has made especially relative to the budget of it, has done very well. Now 24 million views in, and having a splitting the rev share of what's coming in from the monetization of the film. That's something that I just didn't know anything about before, that can be extremely lucrative for a short where you're not necessarily expecting to get anything back, is really interesting. And, quick note on that, it's, yes, there's occasionally times in certain situations where someone can throw a short on their own channel and have that kind of take off. But by and large, there is an advantage going with these channels that, for many reasons, I've had like 3-hour-long conversations with the guy who runs Omeletto, who's kind of giving me a quick masterclass breakdown and like the advanced mindset and analytics that goes into really curating a YouTube channel that gives things the best chance of getting views. There is a real asset of going with a channel that has, that does a really great job in curating and maintaining that channel and giving the algorithm the best chance to serve your film. There's a huge difference between that than like putting that same film up on your own channel that maybe has 100 subscribers or 1,000 subscribers and not having kind of the same return on that. So that's something that I really learned a lot from that experience. And then with Feeling Through, we started to get some distribution interest during our festival run, but it wasn't until it wasn't until a good bit into the Academy race. I guess I think it was just after the short, we got shortlisted. I think it was between shortlist and nomination. Oh, you know what, it might have been right after we got nominated that we signed with a distributor, which was interesting too, because we had, that was a case where it was an interesting discussion with distributors, because we had a good amount of leverage, of course, in that encounter, and we're talking to a number of different distributors. So it was also an opportunity to, know what you wanted out of your distribution deal and be able to be really upfront with the people that were, courting us at that time, to say, kind of compare and contrast and say, hey, we're looking for something more like this. And I think granted, that's obviously like somewhat of a unique situation to be in, to have a short that's nominated and at that point be talking to distributors. But I think it does kind of unearth something where so many times, especially if you haven't had a distributor before, you're like, oh man, I just wish anyone would distribute this. But that you should have a realistic understanding of what your film is, and of course, like how valuable it is, right? Because let's be real, like there's certain films that are more valuable than others, and that's not even necessarily a value judgment on the filmmaking itself. But to put obvious things first, something with like Idris Elba as the star versus someone we've never heard of is already in a different category, right? Just because of the nature of how people go about choosing titles. And if they see faces that they've seen in other things that they already love, they're more likely to go to that thing. But it can also go toward, you can have leverage in the form of having won some significant awards at festivals and kind of having that be a proving ground. Whatever that is, leverage can come in different spaces. And it just comes to the fact of like, don't assume that whatever deal, even if you're just talking to one distributor, the contract that they give you is what you need to sign. There's always room. And that goes for any contract you'll ever sign in life, but particularly in the entertainment industry, there's always room to, talk through certain bullet points of things and negotiate on certain terms. And that was definitely something where we had a lot of leeway with the Feeling Through situation, which allowed us to, I had Feeling Through up on Omeletto again, where it quickly got millions of views and was a great way for us to get the word out during our campaign. That was something that distributors weren't necessarily super keen on, but because of our leverage, we were able to carve that out and still also negotiate on other terms. So it was just a good example of how, be realistic about what your film is and what kind of leverages you do have, but like also don't assume that you don't have certain leverages, or that that things aren't open for discussion, because every term in a contract is always open for discussion. Anyone who's handing you a contract is always handing you their ideal version and not necessarily what is expected to be signed. And I think Maureen's got something to say about that.
Well, just on your note, and that is that some distributors are just filling their catalog. And so it's real, and which I've had, I mean, I don't know if we've all had it happen, but it may at one point or another happen to you. So try not to let that happen. And that's just reinforcing what you're saying, Doug. Find the right distributor for the film, not just any distributor. And even if a distributor has a great name, but your film doesn't really fit there, and they're not really talking ideas about what they'll do with it or what they can do with it, find the one that can do something, because there's no point in having your film in a catalog with 20 million other films and they're not selling it. They're just making their catalog look thick. So, Doug, those are fantastic points. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I actually have a question to follow on with that for both Doug and Maureen. Is like, when you do you guys have a checklist? You know, like, you know, I always say it's like start as you aim to finish, but like, do you have a checklist when you're going through with the distributor, you know, something that's personal to you, like what you want to achieve with them? Is it like, and this could be, I'm saying, like, I'm thinking about everything from like, is there a question in there about how much money they're going to put towards marketing? Is there a question there about, do you have a sort of checklist about territories, et cetera, et cetera? I'd love to hear, like, how do you define what's in your agreement that's important to you individually, you know, because nobody teaches us this to start, you know, it's not what you don't learn this stuff in film school.
Sure.
Well, kind of like what I said to you about the publicist, most of the distributors that I will approach, I've either read a lot of background about them or they've been recommended to me. And I think recommendations, because your relationship with your distributor is a relationship. Mm-hmm. It's not just a business. I mean, it's because of business, but it's a relationship. And that's why the last number of films I've worked with TVF. They haven't been as great in the States, but they've been great in Europe and Asia, and they want the world. And I think, well, you know, and I don't really have that kind of television relationship with any distributor in the States. And it's also much harder, honestly, to get television unless you're an American. So, yeah, so it's been a relationship situation, because they are really good at reporting, which a lot of distributors are not. And that's important, really important, because we are talking money. And they've just been, you know, whenever I go to a market or whatever, because I've gone to a lot over the years, you know, they'll take me for lunch or we'll go for a drink, or, you know, it becomes a kind of a business social also, which I think is important, because then you can ask those questions. But my main thing is what are they selling in these territories? Like, what are they selling? And are they selling the kind of work that you're doing?
You know, and so again, from definitely something that's related, but like slightly different from some of this is universal, some of this is from the shorts lens, but the universal side of this is like, you know, if you have the capacity, you know, because again, like Catherine was talking about how, like, sometimes given the context of like making the film and maybe what you have up next, you don't necessarily have the time and energy and capacity to like invest a lot of like high level thinking in this end, and maybe you bring on other people to do that. But if you have the capacity to do it, I think it's really important to have a vision of your own of where something can live or what you want from it. And I would also strongly encourage, if there's anything we've learned over the last couple of years, it's like out of the box thinking is not just good, but a necessity, because we never know what's going to be happening in this world. So for me, you know, Feeling Through as an example, you know, I had started sharing this film in really unique ways prior to the pandemic, and then found really unique ways to share it during the pandemic. So by the time I got to having conversations with distributors, something that was really important with me is I've been sharing the film in a lot of events, both in person and virtually, in schools, with organizations continuing their DEIA plus, you know, conversations, with institutions around the world, with all these other spaces where, quite frankly, and this is a whole nother conversation, but that's been like, we got a good distribution deal for a short with a good advance and sold in a lot of territories and got some money online as well. But I've made way more money off of doing speaking engagements and events around the film than anything else. And that's a whole other story, but that's also thinking outside of the box and understanding what your film is and where it can live. Not every film is going to do that, but there's certain films that are, you know, really in alignment with the kind of conversations that a lot of, you know, institutions or educational places need to be having anyway. And you can be providing really valuable curriculum or events or what have you that really suit these spaces, some of which have, you know, ample budgets carved out for these various things on an annual basis. So it's just an example of thinking outside of the box, but that comes from, you know, where do I feel like my film could be? Like, I took that into the conversation with our distributor. I knew I had in the language that I would have full rights to like share this in educational spaces and share it alongside this companion documentary that we had made, you know, in the form of this event that I was calling the Feeling Through Experience, and in other versions of that. I brought that into the conversation. That was like very much in the contract that we had, that was the amendment in the contract. So have a vision of and an understanding of where you want the film to be, even if it's not the most traditional of places, and have that be a part of it. Because whether that's something that serves you in talking to your distributor or just in having the idea that then energy follows to actually get it to those places, you might surprise yourself as far as like the kind of reach a film can have and where it can end up.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Doug, did you actually reach out to schools yourself, or did you have someone who like that was their job to, you know, kind of pick places and make that initial introduction for you or whatever?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've been that someone for basically all the elements of this. So I'm definitely someone who has lived in the Feeling Through landscape largely the last few years. But that's also because we just I continue my work with Helen Keller National Center. We just got a sizable 2-year grant to build a comprehensive virtual curriculum around it. That was something that I didn't necessarily think of when I like put pen to paper on the film, but it became something that, given the international response and how many messages we got on a daily basis, I was like, there's a demand here for this. That's something that I'm still passionate about, the advocacy side of this. And to answer your question more specifically, we did a really good job of garnering a lot of attention and publicity, and grew like a good following, whether it be through social media or through our mailing list, and then like a lot of word of mouth, where we really just been fielding stuff that's been coming to us. Very fortunately, like that's a really fortunate situation. But you know, we've had you know, still on a week, I mean, for a while on a daily basis, still on a weekly basis, still a couple years into exhibiting the film, we get messages from and again, this was part of the advantage of making both the short and the companion documentary widely available, is that we started getting messages from educators all around the world who were already using them in the classroom, and then finding that they could have a conversation with myself and, you know, Robert, who's our lead actor, or maybe someone from the Helen Keller National Center, and have that be a part of it. It opened up a lot of conversations, or had a lot of people coming to us. So sometimes if you do your work from a publicity standpoint, a lot of the other stuff will kind of, if you do it right and you have a good bit of luck too, well, you'll have a lot of opportunities coming your way that you don't necessarily need to even have to create, that are just already coming on the heels of doing a good job getting the film out there.
Yeah.
I think that's the point I was making though, when you actually have someone else advocating for it, because they have a reason to advocate. Yeah. So that it makes it, I mean, impact producing is now kind of the modus operandi also for getting your work out there, and that would be sort of filter into that, I would think. Anyway, it's great that you've got the Helen Keller Institute, because that makes so much sense, right? Anyway, sorry, Natalie. I know.
Yeah, no, I was going to just second that. I was just going to say that there's this sort of start as you aim to finish, and you know, I think each of you, or all of us, I think, have that in common, I think, which sort of backs the success of the work, which is, you know, just sort of having a vision, whether it's finding, you know, understanding like the needs of your production, finding your advocates, your partnerships, whether it's the Helen Keller Society, or whether it's like, for me, the advocates were, you know, I was telling a story about a homeless boy from South Africa who sort of, this coming of age story, but it was in skateboarding, and I knew that I needed, he had some, you know, connections, people were interested in him, skateboarders, celebrity skateboarders, you know, Tony Hawk is in the film. It's, you know, got these big names, but that was one of the ways that I sort of started with this, was to sort of reach out to them and say, we're making this, you know, this is happening. Will you support it? I need a mentor. These are the things that I need to sort of support the film, but also in making the film, but also in sort of getting the film out. And they were with me all the way through, you know, in terms of turning up at that first screening that I did, they were there, you know, Tony Hawk was in the room with me. And in terms of like the continuation of that film, is the film was meant, you know, my purpose with that film was to actually help a young man get off the streets and figure out like, how do you do this? You know, how do you sort of, if you want to become an independent person who's coming with zero support, how do you do that? And to this day, the film still generates income for him. All the proceeds go to him. And he's still out there doing speaker engagements and showing the film in South Africa. And he teaches kids. And it did really sort of have this, you know, continued, you know, we started as we aim to finish, and we can, you know, it continues to do that work. And I think, you know, even with the short film that you made, Caroline, you know, you made that to be able to make your feature. Like you started as you aimed to finish. You had the script, you had the feature length script made, and you needed to make the short to finally, you know, after all of the sort of options and things falling through, like these things will happen sort of along the way, but you knew that you had a feature to be made essentially. And that is, you found every single path and, you know, opportunity that you could to essentially get that made, and you got it made, and it's out in the world, and you're sort of, you know, they're continuing. You have this physical story, and it's a story of healing, and every time you show it, it's sort of in the room, you're there sort of working on this healing. So yeah, I think that's the sort of, you know, knowing what your intent and your purpose is, and sort of following that through all the way, distribution, festivals, the festivals you screen at, and, you know, how you sort of get it out into the world, and then how you sort of continue on after that. I think that's really interesting. Sort of, it's great to hear it echoed, even if it's in slightly different formats.
Well, I think we're kind of approaching time here. Does anyone have any kind of parting words or anything they'd like to share before we part ways here?
I kind of do, but I feel bad because I don't want to confuse anyone, but I do have to say that things are constantly changing, and something that might be happening in 2019 is totally off the mark for 2020 and 2021 and so forth and so on. And I can tell you that one of the festivals that we had our feature in, another person who I really admired was there, and we had met when I had like not even the parallel chords short, but a short like before that, a much shorter short, you know, of something else. And she was like somebody I really admired. And then we both had our, you know, features in the same like program. And when she was speaking afterwards, she started talking about self-distribution. And I was like, oh no, my gosh, if this person that I've been looking up to for all these years, if she's got to do self-distribution, what in the world am I going to do? And there was a lot of push for that. So there is that. We didn't talk about that today, but there's a lot of people that talk about, that have done very well financially just doing self-distribution. So
yeah.
Absolutely, this is a great point. And again, this is always an evolving landscape, but it's, you know, with like, you know, obviously this move over to streamers and that being a whole nother conversation, just everything that's changed around the traditional exhibition models rapidly over the last several years, and things are constantly evolving. So there is like, you know, learn what's worked for others in the past, but like be super open-minded and learning about what's happening now and how things are evolving is such a great kind of sentiment to end on there, for sure.
And Catherine, I called you Caroline when I was bigging up your story there. So my apologies, Catherine.
That's okay. I can't wait to see everybody's films. I mean, I've seen some of them, but I need to see everybody's.
Yeah,
me too.
All the extra ones too, the ones that aren't. So
yeah.
I'm excited.
And thanks so much, Doug. You did a great job.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you all made it easy. It was very much a pleasure to chat with all of you. Of course, thanks to the Portland Film Festival for getting us on this Zoom and chatting here. And yeah, I think this was I know I learned a lot from the three of you, so I'm glad I was a part of this conversation. Thank you all.
Me too, and it made me feel terribly guilty for not spending more time on distribution. Oh my God.
But I do think that there's something great about, especially with the Portland Film Festival, that I really got out of it. And I'm sort of reminded of this here. It's like that energy that you need to keep pushing. It really does come from sort of being in the room with other filmmakers. And the Portland Film Festival is a filmmakers film festival.
Totally.
And there's such an independent spirit. And I get a lot of energy. I'm sort of reignited. I've got a film I'm working on now, and I'm sort of, really energized by this conversation. And these are the kind of conversations that you have in person or, as part of the festival that are really, really powerful. And you can't underestimate how much you need them when you're sort of digging deep for that final push to, or that continued push that you need to get your film out to the world. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Portland. Thank you, Diane.
You're making me cry, Natalie.
I'm looking forward to watching everybody's films again. And
me too.
I need it after this. So thank you.
I want to see Jada. How many millions of people have watched? I wrote it down.
Yeah, if you go to Omeletto, it's like it's there. You can find it easily there. Yeah.
Great. Perfect. Okay. My Millennial Life after Portland is, I think you can watch it on Amazon. So.
Oh, awesome.